my first question. Usually to be conscious means receiving our sensory impressions alertly and responding to them. What do you mean by being conscious?
So there's being conscious and there's consciousness. So being conscious is living in a wakeful, present state. That's being conscious. Consciousness is already living us. So there's not something that we need to be really in order to be this consciousness that's living us. So there's this fine distinction here. So to be conscious, to be aware, to be alert, to be awake, wakeful to life. So you said sense impressions, this that's around us. So really to be aware and awake to everything, not just this that's around us, but also within us and as us. So as us, as life, as another human being, as an animal, as a plant, as a, as an object. That there's awareness and the being conscious to, with, and as everything. Then this that is consciousness is living this life. And there's an awareness also of that. Is there something more to ask about that question? You see, it's the words we use. We speak about conscious and unconscious and subconscious and consciousness. There are all these words that we use that in a way make things seem difficult, where life is simplicity. Consciousness is simplicity in itself. The human being, the human mind makes things complicated. So if we say being conscious, being present, being aware, it implies an act of doing. So there is that step that we take, not a step anywhere actually, but a step that we take to decide to be here as we are. Then we discover this consciousness that's living already wakefully through all of life. The more we give our attention to it, the more it might be seen or perceived as someone being conscious. But there isn't anyone being conscious. We are consciousness. There's that initial decision to speak the truth, to be free, to be here, and consciousness is attending to the rest.
I remember J. Krishnamurti said there's no such thing as unconsciousness.
So it depends in what way that's being spoken of, because if someone was, hit on the head, and we call that being unconscious because they're breathing, the body's processes are going on, but they're not awake or asleep, we call that unconscious. So I would think what he's referencing to is a human being who's either sleeping or waking, not out cold unconscious. That it isn't unconscious, it's all consciousness. We choose to be driven by our fears, of life, this that is driving the body, the form, the life, the survival instincts. It's as though we give our attention to that, so it might seem like we live and make choices from an unconscious place, but really the consciousness is always here alive through every human being, no matter what the life looks like.
Yeah, I think he was talking about that psychological view of things, that there was such a thing as the unconscious. And he was saying, no.
It's all it's all consciousness. It's how human beings like to compartmentalize things, and so we go, oh, we'll look at life rather than all of life, and we'll go, well, all these aspects of life, and that's really why the way that humans do this can be useful, can also be very difficult as well. Labelling, misleading, and then we think there are all these areas that are separate. It's all one life, it's all one consciousness. And if we're trying to understand this with the mind, that's where we get caught and trapped. Not really trapped, the illusion of being trapped, but this caughtness, trying to understand something that the mind arises in. So it's why even a conversation around what is this consciousness, the form, the life, the mind, everything is arising in this that's permeating through everything, living through everything. Did you want to ask anything or add anything to this?
No, I sometimes wonder about the distinction between being in the sensory world and responding or not responding to the senses. I'm hearing information recently about not I think not engaging with the sensory input in your life somehow, that it's not real, that it's not, that consciousness is stable, consistent, and the rest is just noise, So I'm kind of a bit confused about the engagement with the world as consciousness,
So if we use another example to make this more clear, if we look at a seed that's grown into a plant or a flower, so there are sensory impulses and impressions coming into and surrounding a plant or a flower that's growing. There's the warmth of the sun or the overbearing heat of the sun, there's the rain, the wind, there's all of this that's going on around the plant, creating conditions for thriving or demise of the form. The plant has, we know from scientific studies, the plant has responses to the stimulus. So this is the form itself, has responses to stimulus. So our physical form is no different to that. Whether it's light or dark or rain, whether it's energy, because that's all energy. We know with plants they also respond to emotional energy and thought patterns and thought forms and thought processes. We also know water responds in a similar way, that we can have certain energy, emotions or thoughts projected towards water, and that can be recorded. So as a human being, the form is no different. The form is no different to the plant or the water. We're made up of such a huge proportion of water. So really what you're speaking of is, how do I stop engaging with my thoughts about a sensory input? How do I alter the effect of the input on the physicality? So we can choose to engage with the thoughts about what's occurring naturally in the world or not. So we know that if, like the water and the plants, if we speak negatively to the plants and negatively to the water, that's actually perceived, and scientifically they've shown, it's measured, that it can have an adverse effect on the crystalline structure when water's frozen. It can have an adverse effect on a plant that it causes it to then not thrive. So we can have positive input, positive emotions, positive thought processes, and we can see scientifically again in a measured result the effect that that has on the thriving of a plant, and also the frozen, the crystalline structures of water, how that thrives. So as human beings, we have this faculty of mind that's an incredible gift, blessing, and a curse at the same time. If we continually live our life from this place of mind and thought, the first piece that you said when you asked the question was, I've been wondering about. Now really that's what human beings do. They wonder, they spend this time not in awe, not that kind of wonderment. They spend their time and give their attention to thought. And so giving the attention to thought rather than present to what's here. So present to the stimulus that's here. The sun and the rain and the emotion and the thought and the surrounding. And we naturally then gravitate to that which causes thriving. We see it with the plants, you know, they gravitate, if you have a look, they gravitate towards sun and light, which helps them to thrive. You see, they bend over, they reach towards. It's a natural process of thriving of form. But they don't have to think, oh, should I just reach a little bit more or pull back? This is the human process. So rather than giving our attention to thinking about the process, we can let the process unfold naturally and surrender actually here. Is that helpful? So we could spend more of our time being undisturbed like the plant. Open, like really just open, blooming, opening, flourishing, allowing the season of the flower to come, to fall away, the seed to come, the leaves to drop. Just this natural process of form.